Now we want to give you a live look at the Vatican. It is just after 1:30 in the morning there. So later today, the cardinals who will choose the next pope will meet behind closed doors in the Sistine Chapel. The conclave will include all 133 cardinals under the age of 80. Staff at the Vatican have been working to get the chapel ready. Joining us now in studio to help explain the entire process is Dr. Michael Dixon, a retired chaplain who's worked with the Diocese of Phoenix. It is wonderful to have you here.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
You know, I feel like we've been talking about this for days. You know, the big lead up to when the conclave begins. And it's so interesting because, you know, the entire process, it's been shrouded in so much secrecy, so much ancient tradition over centuries, and also in a way, just the fact that the cardinals seem, you know, sequestered. What strikes you most about this whole process?
Well, the whole thing is about secrecy, and that's because everybody wants to know, but nobody can know what they say to each other when they sequestered the cardinals. And that's very important because what they are hoping for is the Holy Spirit to come and inspire them. They can debate with one another, but there's all kinds of reasons why they would say, this person, no, this is the person, oh no, because they're coming from all over the world, and the Pope has to take care of 1.6 billion Catholics. And so what you have to do is to think, well, what do people in Chicago think? Well, what about some people in Texas?
Right.
Well, what about Uganda?
Right. Latin America,
Exactly.
Asia, all over the world.
And the Pope has to be, and Francis was very good with this because he was going all over the place and embraced, you know, humanity.
Yeah.
And so he'll be hard to replace just on that aspect alone.
Yeah. Looking back, you know, as far as when this decision, how long it's going to take, back when Pope Francis was chosen in 2013, that selection process only took a day. You know, we were talking earlier that the longest took 3 years back, I think in the 1200s with Pope Gregory.
Yes.
How long do you think this process will take?
It's going to be, I think this is going to be a stretched out process simply because of what we were just talking about. How do you find someone who can touch the hearts of all of the disparate cultures?
Right.
You know, because you have conservatives, you have liberals, you have a whole mixture of people in the United States. How do you find someone that can do that? And so that's why it takes sometimes a long time. And you have to remember that they're only in conclave 2 times, well, first, there's only one on the first day. But from there on, it's 2 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon.
Right.
Well, in between there, they're talking. They're cloistered. Nobody can talk to them, but they can talk to each other. And so that is where all of the where the backdoor stuff comes in.
Sure.
You know, I know something about it.
That we won't know, you know, again.
You never know.
So much secrecy.
That's
and
right.
You know what's interesting? We talked about, and you touched on it, just, you know, how Pope Francis, he was very progressive. He was the people's Pope, right? And there's been so much talk, well, will this next Pope follow in his footsteps and be that progressive Pope and carry on, or will we revert back to a more traditional conservative Pope? What do you think?
Yeah, that's interesting because it's like a pendulum. You know, sometimes you go from a Pope Benedict, who was very doctrinal, as we know, and then we get Francis, and you know, the things go back and forth and back and forth. But the important thing is it all evens out. And we're not talking about something that will last for 10 years or 20 years.
Right.
We're talking about 2,000 years of dogma being developed, how you respond to what the population seems to be yearning for, kindness more, loving one another more, and less, well, you're going to go to hell.
Right,
you know,
right. The
that kind of
overarching, you know, what matters most.
Absolutely.
So I want to get your take on this because, again, you just touched on this earlier, that Pope Francis, I mean, he selected so many cardinals from all over the world. This is, in fact, the most diverse that it's ever been. We're talking people from Latin America, from Asia, from the Pacific, Africa, the Middle East. And there's actually been some top candidates for the papacy. We've got Luis Antonio Tagle from the Philippines, and then there's also an African cardinal, Fridolina Ambongo. Is there anybody in particular that you see most fitting for the next pope?
Well, it's interesting because Pope Francis overshadowed everything and everybody because of his style, his holiness, and all the rest of it. But now when we have the intercontinental cardinals that could be considered, and I think they are giving most consideration for someone maybe from Asia. That would be my guess. That there's one cardinal from the Philippines.
The one that I just
The
mentioned.
one that you just mentioned.
Yes, Luis Antonio Tagle,
And-
who happens to be the youngest one, by the way.
Yes.
Yes.
And now it's time for someone who can grow with the evolution of the church. But you never know.
Yeah, exactly.
You never know. The interesting thing is also about picking their name. Did you know how that started?
Picking the
Picking a
name of...
themselves as a pope. Because, Francis is not named Francis. But
right.
how do you choose the name? And they all have to come with some kind of an idea of who they would be called if they were a pope.
Sure.
And it was back in like the 500s or something like that. But the guy's name was like Mercurius. But he didn't want to take, and that was at a time when they used their own name.
Yeah.
Well, that's the name of a Roman god, a pagan god. So he chose John II.
Oh.
So everybody has their own reason for,
Sure.
choosing a name.
Their own identity.
I just found that kind of
That is interesting.
picky, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, Dr. Michael Dixon, we so appreciate your time and your insight. Thank you so much.